Welcome, dear listeners, to another chilling journey into the shadows. Tonight, we travel to the first state, Delaware. Though small in size, this land is steeped in history, and with history comes ghostly echoes of the past. From cursed mansions to restless spirits lurking in forgotten corridors, Delaware hides some of the most haunted locations in the country. Dim the lights, settle in, and prepare for a tale of terror as we unveil the top most haunted places in Delaware. Fort Delaware. Peapatch Island, deep in the heart of the Delaware River, sits an eerie, abandoned island shrouded in mystery. Known as Peapatch Island, this location, home to Fort Delaware, has long been rumored to be haunted by restless souls. It's a place where history and the supernatural converge, and for those brave enough to explore its forgotten corners, the stories of its dark past are all too real. The history of Fort Delaware dates back to the 19th century. Constructed during the Civil War, the fort was built to protect the crucial waterways leading into Delaware, guarding against Confederate attacks. It became a military stronghold, playing a vital role during the war and well into the early 20th century. However, its significance was overshadowed by the gruesome tragedies that occurred within its walls. During the Civil War, Fort Delaware was used as a prison for Confederate soldiers, who were captured and held under harsh conditions. The overcrowded prison camp quickly became a death trap. Disease spread rapidly, and the lack of food and medical care left hundreds of prisoners to perish. Some died in the cold, damp cells, while others succumbed to illness in the unforgiving environment. It was a place where human suffering was palpable, and many of the men who perished had their lives snuffed out too soon, their final breath taken in the shadow of a great war they could not win. But even after the war ended, the dark history of the fort didn't fade. Over the years, it became a place where countless spirits were said to wander, trapped in time by the agony they endured. Those who dared to venture to Peapatch Island in the modern age have reported chilling experiences that seem to echo the horrors of the past. It was late one autumn evening when Sarah, a history enthusiast and amateur ghost hunter, decided to take a trip to Peapatch Island. She had heard whispers of strange occurrences from others who had visited, but it was the island's reputation as a haunted location that piqued her interest. Armed with her camera and a notebook to document the strange happenings, she made her way to the island with a small group of fellow adventurers. As they arrived on the small ferry that took visitors to the island, the thick fog that hung over the river seemed to swallow the boat whole. The world beyond the boat's edges was obscured, leaving only the dim outline of the island in the distance. The air felt thick with anticipation, as though the island itself was waiting for them, daring them to step onto its cursed soil. As the group disembarked, the island seemed to loom over them, its abandoned buildings standing like silent sentinels of a forgotten era. The fort's massive stone walls, cracked and weathered, loomed above them, casting long shadows that stretched across the ground. The place was eerily quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind and the distant call of birds. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine as they made their way toward the entrance of the fort. She could almost hear the whispers of soldiers long gone, their voices muffled by time but still present in the air. As they entered the fort's dark, narrow hallways, the atmosphere grew heavier. The walls, lined with faded graffiti and decaying remnants of old military equipment, told the stories of those who had once called the fort home. Her group began to explore the lower levels of the fort, where the prison cells once stood. The air was colder here, and the oppressive silence seemed to weigh on their chests. Sarah's flashlight flickered as they reached the cells, and she could feel a strange unease creeping over her. The cells were small, dark, and claustrophobic. The walls were etched with names, some of them so faded that they seemed almost ghostly. It was in this part of the fort that Sarah first began to feel the presence of something, or someone. The temperature seemed to drop further, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood on end. She tried to shake it off, but the feeling lingered. The others in her group were equally unsettled, their steps becoming more hesitant as they ventured deeper into the fort's labyrinthine passages. As they rounded a corner, Sarah noticed something unusual. A faint light appeared at the end of the hallway, flickering like a candle in the darkness. It was too far ahead to be one of their flashlights, and yet it moved as if someone were holding it. Her heart raced, and she felt a strange compulsion to follow it. Without a word, she walked toward the light. Her companions hesitated but followed, drawn by the same unexplainable pull. As they reached the end of the hallway, the light vanished. The space before them was empty, the shadows deepening into the stone walls. But that wasn't the most unsettling part. What Sarah noticed next were the sounds. Faint at first, like whispers or murmurs, the voices seemed to echo from every corner of the room. She couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable, desperate, as though the voices were trapped in the walls, unable to escape. She felt her breath catch in her throat, her pulse quickening, and then, in the corner of her vision, she saw movement. A figure, pale and translucent, appeared at the far end of the room. It was the figure of a man, dressed in ragged Confederate uniform, his face gaunt and hollow. His eyes, sunken with pain, stared directly at Sarah, as though he had been waiting for her arrival. Frozen in place, Sarah felt the temperature drop even further, the cold seeping into her bones. The figure didn't move, but its presence was suffocating. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the chamber like 1,000 voices in unison. Suddenly, the figure dissolved into the air, leaving behind an overwhelming sense of sadness. The group, now visibly shaken, quickly made their way back to the ferry, the whispers still ringing in their ears. As they left the island, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they had left something behind, something that had been waiting for them, something that would never rest. As the ferry pulled away from the shore, Sarah looked back at the dark outline of Peepatch Island. The fort's towering walls loomed like the shadow of an ancient, forgotten beast, and she knew that the island's ghosts would never be at peace. The souls of those who had suffered within the walls of Fort Delaware still roamed its abandoned halls, their restless spirits, forever tied to the place that had witnessed their pain. For Sarah, the haunting experience on Peepatch Island would remain with her for the rest of her life. The whispers, the figure in the Confederate uniform, and the cold, oppressive atmosphere, all of it had been a reminder that some places never let go of the past. And for Fort Delaware, its ghosts were forever bound to its stone walls, trapped in time, unable to escape the horrors they had known. And so, Peepatch Island remains, a silent sentinel of the past, waiting for the next curious soul to venture onto its haunted shores. For those who do, one thing is certain: the island will never forget its history. And neither will the spirits that linger there, forever bound to the cold, forgotten place they once called home. The haunting of Rockwood Mansion, Wilmington, Delaware, holds many secrets in its charming streets and lush greenery. Yet few places carry as dark and mysterious a history as Rockwood Mansion. Once a grand estate built for the wealthy, it is now a haunting ground for something much darker than mere memories. The mansion's story is filled with whispers, strange sounds, and eerie encounters that have left many feeling unsettled. Rockwood Mansion sits at the edge of Wilmington, nestled in the heart of the city's sprawling park. Its towering brick structure, surrounded by lush gardens, stands as a reminder of a bygone era when prosperity and elegance reigned. The mansion was built in the 1850s by Joseph Shipley, a prosperous merchant, and it quickly became a symbol of wealth and class in Delaware. For years, it was a hub for high society, hosting lavish parties, balls, and gatherings. But there was a darkness lurking within the walls of Rockwood Mansion, a shadow cast over it long before the Shipley family ever set foot inside. The mansion's very foundation was built on an unsettling history, one that would eventually lead to its haunting. In the years following the construction of the mansion, the Shipley family grew. Joseph's son, Charles Shipley, inherited the estate and carried on the family legacy of wealth. But Charles was not like his father. He was known to be a quiet, reclusive man who rarely interacted with the outside world. He spent most of his time within the mansion, reading books on philosophy and science, obsessed with finding the key to immortality. Rumors began to spread about Charles's strange behavior. Some claimed he had become obsessed with the idea of communicating with the dead. Late-night seances were said to be held in the grand parlor, where Charles sought answers from the beyond. Over time, his obsession deepened, and he became increasingly isolated, shutting himself off from the world. It was during this time that Charles's wife, Emily Shipley, began to show signs of unease. She reported hearing strange noises in the mansion at night, footsteps that echoed down the halls when no one was there, whispers carried by the wind, and objects that seemed to move on their own. At first, she thought it was simply the house settling or her imagination running wild. But soon, the occurrences became too frequent to ignore. One evening, Emily was found collapsed in the parlor, pale and trembling. She claimed to have seen the ghostly apparition of a woman in a flowing white gown standing in the shadows of the room. The figure's eyes glowed with an eerie, unnatural light, and she beckoned Emily to follow her. The encounter left Emily terrified, unable to speak of the experience for days. When she finally found her voice, she told Charles about what she had seen, but he dismissed her fears as the result of too much stress. But it wasn't just Emily who experienced these strange phenomena. Servants and guests who stayed in the mansion also began to report seeing strange figures in the hallways, hearing ghostly laughter echoing through the rooms, and feeling a cold, oppressive presence that seemed to follow them wherever they went. Some even claimed that objects would vanish without a trace, only to reappear in the most unexpected places. Despite these troubling reports, the Shipley family continued to live at Rockwood Mansion. Charles's obsession with the supernatural only grew, and he began to delve deeper into forbidden rituals. In his search for immortality, he became more reclusive, locking himself away in the mansion's study for days on end. Emily, once a vibrant and happy woman, grew pale and gaunt, her health deteriorating rapidly as the strange occurrences in the house escalated. It wasn't long before a tragedy struck. One fateful night, a loud crash echoed through the mansion, followed by a scream that sent chills down the spines of those who heard it. The next morning, Charles Shipley was found dead in the study, his body contorted in a way that was impossible to explain. His eyes were wide open in a look of sheer terror, his hands clutching a strange symbol carved into the wood of his desk. The cause of death was never determined, but many believed that Charles had somehow summoned something dark and malevolent during one of his rituals. In his desperation to escape death, he had opened a door to the other side, unleashing an entity that would haunt the mansion for years to come. After Charles's death, Emily could no longer bear to stay in the mansion. The once beautiful home had become a prison of fear and torment. She left Wilmington, never to return, and the mansion was left abandoned, its doors and windows slowly decaying with time. The property changed hands several times over the years, but no one seemed able to live in the mansion for long. Each new owner would eventually leave, terrified and shaken by the unexplainable occurrences within the house. As time passed, the mansion fell into disrepair, and the stories of its haunting grew. People claimed to hear strange noises coming from the property at night, the sound of footsteps echoing through empty halls, whispers in the wind, and the unmistakable sound of something, or someone, moving in the darkness. Some said they could still see the ghostly figure of Emily Shipley, wandering the gardens, her face a mask of sorrow and longing. In the 20th century, Rockwood Mansion was opened to the public as a museum. But the haunting continued. Staff members reported feeling an unnerving presence as they moved through the building, and visitors often spoke of feeling watched or followed. Some claimed to have seen shadowy figures out of the corner of their eyes, while others said they felt an overwhelming sense of dread as they stepped into certain rooms. One of the most infamous occurrences at Rockwood Mansion happened when a group of paranormal investigators visited the site. Armed with equipment to capture any supernatural activity, they set out to explore the mansion. As they entered the grand parlor, they felt a sudden drop in temperature, and their instruments began to malfunction. The team's leader, a seasoned investigator, claimed to have seen a dark shadow move across the room, followed by a loud, disembodied voice whispering his name. The investigators left in a hurry, their footage showing nothing but static. But their stories fueled the growing legend of Rockwood Mansion, a place where the line between the living and the dead was thin and fragile. Today, Rockwood Mansion stands as a reminder of the past, a haunting, decaying monument to the Shipley family and their dark obsession. Though it has been restored and is open to visitors, the mansion is forever marked by the restless spirits that linger within its walls. Visitors to Rockwood Mansion often report feeling uneasy, as if they are not alone, and some claim to have seen fleeting glimpses of figures watching them from the windows. For those brave enough to spend the night within the mansion's eerie confines, the question remains, is it the spirits of the Shipley family that still haunt Rockwood Mansion, Or is there something darker, something more ancient and malevolent that lingers, waiting for its next victim? Only the mansion knows the truth, and it's a truth that is hidden beneath layers of dust and the whispers of the dead. Rockwood Mansion may have been built with the promise of grandeur, but it is now a place where only the brave dare to tread. And those who do might leave with more than just memories. They might leave with something far darker that will follow them for the rest of their lives. The Addy Sea Bethany Beach. It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend getaway, just a couple of days by the ocean. Alicia and her friends had been looking forward to their stay at the Addy Sea, a beautiful bed and breakfast right on the shore of Bethany Beach. It was the perfect retreat after months of work stress. The beach was quiet, the ocean calm, and the air thick with the scent of salt water. But no one had warned them about the dark history that clung to the old inn like the sea breeze itself. The Addy Sea was more than just a bed and breakfast. It had once been a grand mansion, built in the late 1800s by the wealthy Addy family. Over the years, it had changed hands multiple times, but no matter who owned it, strange rumors persisted. People claimed they could hear whispering voices in the dead of night, see flickering lights in the windows when no one was inside, and even feel a chilling presence in certain rooms. But Alicia was a skeptic. She had heard the stories, of course, but she wasn't one to believe in ghostly tales. The moment they arrived, Alicia felt a strange sense of unease. The mansion was beautiful, its Victorian architecture towering over the small beach town. Yet, as she stepped inside, she felt a slight shiver run down her spine. The grand foyer was dimly lit, and the air was thick, as if the house itself was holding its breath. "Welcome to the Addy Sea!" The innkeeper, a middle-aged woman with sharp features, greeted them with a tight smile. Her eyes, however, seemed too intense, almost as if she could see straight through Alicia. "Let me show you to your rooms." They followed her up the grand staircase, the old wooden steps creaking underfoot. The air grew cooler as they ascended, and the hallway stretched out before them, lined with dark, antique furniture. There was something eerily quiet about the place, a silence that seemed to pulse in the walls. Alicia's room was at the end of the hall, just past an old portrait of a woman with hollow eyes. The innkeeper paused before she opened the door, her expression turning serious. "This room has a history," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Some say it's haunted. But you'll be fine. Just don't go exploring at night." Alicia gave a half-hearted laugh. "I'm sure we'll be just fine." As night fell, the group settled into their rooms. The soft sound of the waves crashing against the shore was calming, and for a moment, Alicia felt at peace. But as the clock struck midnight, the air grew colder. Alicia tossed and turned, unable to sleep. The house seemed to groan and sigh with each passing minute, as if it was alive in its own right. She finally decided to get up and get a glass of water. As she passed down the hallway, she noticed something strange: whispers. At first, she thought it was the wind or the sound of the ocean, but as she drew closer to the staircase, the voices became clearer. They were soft, but unmistakable. Two voices, almost like a conversation, but no one was there. Her heart raced, but she couldn't bring herself to go back to her room. Instead, she stepped closer to the stairwell, her curiosity piqued. The whispers seemed to come from below, from the basement. Alicia had heard stories about that place, how it was once the Addy family's private quarters, and how people who went down there never came back the same. Ignoring the warning in her mind, Alicia began to descend. The stairs creaked underfoot, and the air grew colder with each step. As she reached the bottom, she found herself in a small, dimly lit room. Old furniture was scattered around, and the walls were lined with dusty bookshelves. But there, in the center of the room, was something far more disturbing: a rocking chair. It moved slowly back and forth, as if someone had just left it. Suddenly, a chill ran down Alicia's spine, and she turned to leave. But before she could take a step, she heard it: footsteps behind her. Her breath caught in her throat as she whipped around, but the room was empty. The chair continued to rock. Panicking, she raced back up the stairs, her pulse pounding in her ears. When she reached the landing, she heard the whisper again, clearer this time. It was coming from her room. Alicia hesitated at the door, her hand trembling as she reached for the knob. The whispers stopped the moment she stepped inside, but she wasn't alone. A figure stood by the window, staring out into the darkness. It was a woman, dressed in a long, flowing gown, her face obscured by her hair. "Who are you?" Alicia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The figure didn't respond. Instead, she turned slowly, her face a pale, hollow mask of sorrow. Her eyes were empty, lifeless. Alicia stumbled back, fear flooding her veins. And then, the woman spoke, her voice cold and distant. "You shouldn't have come here." Before Alicia could react, the figure vanished, as if she had never been there at all. The room was silent once more. The next morning, Alicia tried to shake off the events of the previous night. Her friends were still sleeping, oblivious to the strange occurrences. But as she made her way downstairs, she saw the innkeeper again. The woman's eyes seemed even more knowing than before. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, though Alicia could tell she already knew the answer. Alicia nodded, though her mind was racing. "What happened last night?" "I saw someone in my room." The innkeeper's expression faltered, her lips pressing into a thin line. "The Addy family didn't leave easily," she said, her voice soft. "They say their spirits still wander these halls, trapped between life and death. Some of them are angry." Alicia's blood ran cold. She had heard of hauntings, of restless spirits, but nothing had prepared her for the truth. That evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching her, that the air itself was thick with unseen eyes. She had to leave. But as she and her friends packed their things, she realized they weren't alone. The whispers filled the house once more, echoing down the hallways, growing louder, more frantic. When Alicia finally stepped out of the door, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the beach. But as she looked back at the Addy Sea, she couldn't help but feel that it was still watching, still waiting. The Addy Sea was no longer just a bed and breakfast. It was a place where the past and present collided, where restless spirits lingered, and where those who dared to stay would never truly leave. And so, we leave behind the haunted roads of Delaware, but the spirits remain, watching, waiting, lingering in the shadows. Have you ever visited these chilling locations? Do you believe in the restless souls that roam these historic grounds? Share your experiences in the comments below. If you dare. If you enjoyed this journey into the supernatural, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a story from the depths of the unknown. Until next time, stay curious, and stay afraid.